right, I hope you can hear me. This is Sandy, your rec center dietitian. If you have any questions about this presentation, you can always reach me at sandra.holterhouse@rockwellcollins.com. And I'll go ahead and get started here. I appreciate y'all joining me tonight. We're going to talk about bolster and balancing our immune system. And I guess the one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was, we think a strong immune system is a great thing, but I think what I want you to think about is just having a very balanced immune system. And I'll kind of go into that here on this second page. So there's a part of our population that might be immunocompromised or have a underactive immune system. So certainly our babies, our children, they don't have good immune systems when they're born. They have to develop those over time. Nursing mothers provide some immunity to our infants, so that's helpful. Pregnant women, they have that little scavenger living on them, and that takes a lot of their nutrients from them, so they can also be immunocompromised. And then our elderly population, they may not produce as much acid in the body or as many be able to absorb nutrients as well. So they can also be immunocompromised as well. You can also be immunocompromised if you have any disease that can weaken the immune system. So that could be like cancer or diabetes, or if you have limited kidney or liver function as well. And other things such as autoimmune disease or HIV/AIDS, we certainly know that that will compromise you. And then the other things would be different types of drugs. So our corticosteroids, a lot of times we might be having a reaction and we go to our doctor and they'll give us a steroid. Well, the steroid actually helps reduce our immune system so that we're not having that overactive reaction. So those drugs can weaken the immune system. That's why you don't want to try to be on those for a long period of time. Certainly chemotherapy and transplant drugs, so those rejection drugs, have that same effect. So they try to keep our immune system at a lower level so that we're not overreacting to a transplant or to chemotherapy, that type of thing. So to have a balanced immune system, that would be that more optimal place that we want to be. And when I'm talking about the immune system, I do have this picture here on the slide that just kind of goes through all the different areas of our body that are part of the immune system. So, our tear ducts, so our eyes, we produce tears there that helps keep foreign bodies from invading or getting in through the eyes. We have the tonsils and the adenoids. And I don't know about you, but when I was 11, they just took my tonsils out of me. And that was pretty common practice a while ago. But now they found that white blood cells are actually produced in the tonsils and the adenoids. And that is to help fight off infection that will start to come in through the mouth or the throat. So important to have that. Our skin is certainly, our largest organ of our body, and that's a big place where we fight off infection. If you think about getting a cut or something and that it can become infected, the skin is certainly very important for keeping infections out. The mucus and the saliva, that's all part of our digestive system, through the nose as well. That is to catch those organisms and to help fight off those invaders as well. We know that our bone marrow, that produces our white blood cells, so our neutrophils, our T cells and B cells. We've probably heard a lot of about those in the news here recently with the coronavirus. Those cells are the memory cells, the T cells and the B cells. We also have bronchial associated lymphatic tissue. So if something does get through the airway, that can be caught in the lungs, and hopefully we'll be able to fight off the infection there. In the intestine, we have what we call Peyer's patches, and that's part of the GALT or gut associated lymphatic tissue. And when I was in school, we talked about the gut actually having and containing about 70% of your immune system. So that's why it's so important to keep your gut healthy. And if you think about it, that your gut, the intestine, is really that last barrier between the gut and going into the bloodstream. So foreign particles that can get through the gut or pass through the gut can get into the bloodstream very easily. The appendix, another one of those organs that we didn't talk or was easily removed. They now think that it contains nutrients to help if infection gets into the colon, so that they would deliver nutrients to the colon. So the other thing, the spleen, that's another thing you hear about. If someone gets in an accident and they rupture their spleen, it gets removed. But those are all important parts of our immune system, as well as our lymph nodes or lymphatic tissue that we have. So that's all part of that immune system. So we want to maintain a balanced immune system, and that will mean that we're functioning at an optimal level. The other thing that we can see is autoimmune disease or having an overactive immune system. So our body starts to kind of attack itself and fight against, overreact to any kind of foreign inflammation or anything that kind of comes into the system. So that would be that trade-off of having an overactive immune system. So I'm just going to briefly go through some lifestyle changes because I really want to focus on nutrients here. But I pulled these from a couple of websites, Cedars-Sinai and healthline.com. So some of the important things are really making sure we're getting adequate sleep. And I think sleep needs to be kind of a routine. So we talk about just developing that sleep hygiene routine, trying to go to bed similar time every night and working up to that time with, when we're going to brush our teeth, when we're going to put the kids down, all those different things so that we can have that little bit of time to ourselves to unwind before we go to sleep. So that's very important. If you're a smoker, quitting smoking is very important for the immune system. Maintaining a healthy weight, regular exercise. So all these things that we promote at the gym are very important. You also want to avoid infection. So you don't really want to go out and try to get, catch a cold or get an infection, because that will weaken your immune system at that time. Minimizing stress is also very important. Another thing that I really like to focus on with people is, trying to reduce stress in their lives. And then eating that whole foods diet. And the resources I used for this information were, again, the Cedars-Sinai and the Healthline. So moving on, and just kind of getting into the nutrients that I think are really important for balancing and bolstering the immune system. Again, I went to a bunch of different websites and kind of landed on a couple here where I pulled these nutrients from that they were common on these websites. And those were Harvard, EDU, and also the Cleveland Clinic. But I came up with 5 vitamins that I think are very important, 1 amino acid and 3 minerals. And I just want to tell you, I did put together sheets. So anyone that's registered for this seminar, this webinar, will get a sheet from me. I'll probably mail those out tomorrow. And it will have these nutrients. It will have some other links and information, and the recipes that I'm including here in this presentation will also be in there for you. So if we leave tonight and you don't have that information, don't worry, you'll get that in the email I send you tomorrow. So we'll start just focusing on these different nutrients, and we'll start with vitamin A. I'm going to see here, can I minimize this? There we go. So how it helps. Vitamin A has an antioxidant effect that helps strengthen the immune system. So what you want to do is make sure you're getting the correct amount each day. And that's the recommended dietary allowance. For women, that's 700 micrograms of retinol activity equivalents per day. And for men, that's 900 micrograms of retinol activity equivalents per day. There's also a UL, so an upper level tolerable limit. And so they don't recommend that you get over 3,000 micrograms per day. What can happen is if you do get too much vitamin A, you can develop what they call hypervitaminosis A. And that usually happens if you're taking supplements of vitamin A of the preform type here. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But that can result in liver damage or birth defects. So again, if you're taking a multivitamin or you're taking supplements, just making sure that you're not exceeding that UL each day. So I mentioned there are two types of vitamin A. There's the preform. We're mostly going to find that in our animal foods, and then it's also used in our supplements, and that's readily absorbable form. So that's why that preform, especially in the supplements, can lead to excessive vitamin A in the body. And then there's the provitamins. So this is the beta carotene foods, and there's other foods, alpha carotene and cryptoxanthin. But mainly what we speak about when we're talking about vitamin A is beta carotene foods, and those will actually be converted to vitamin A. So it's a little bit slower process, and also doesn't lead to generally getting that excessive amount of vitamin A. So this next slide here shows some of the great sources of vitamin A and the amounts. And I do have information in that sheet that I'll send you tomorrow on where you can find this information as well. The website that I used, it's a National Institute of Health website. But I think what's funny when you look at a lot of these slides and we go through these foods is I think you'll see some repeating foods, commonalities on several of these different nutrients. So I've been joking that we see a lot of the beef liver and a lot of the spinach listed on these slides. So again, you're shooting for that 700 to 900 micrograms, depending on if you're female or male, per day. And a great source for that would be half of a sweet potato. So that would give you a good amount of vitamin A, that close to that 700 micrograms. So if you're not having some of those foods that are listed at the top, you might have to have a few more sources of vitamin A during the day. And again, also you have to take into account what you might be getting through a supplement as well if you're taking a multivitamin. So my vitamin A recipe is Cajun roasted sweet potatoes. This is a recipe that I've made frequently, and in fact, I'm going to make it next week for my small Thanksgiving celebration. But delicious recipe, great way to use sweet potatoes, and it's got a little bit of spice and a little bit of sweetness to it. So I always like kind of combining those things. Again, you'll get these recipes in the handout that I will send to you tomorrow from work. So we'll move on. Vitamin B9, which is folate. How it helps, it actually helps to produce and repair our DNA. We know that in animal studies that we see reduced immunity if there's a folate deficiency. And what you want to do, of course, then is obtain that recommended dietary allowance of that 400 micrograms per day. If you are pregnant or nursing, you would want to bump that up to 600 micrograms per day. We found back in the 1990s, I think in 1998, they actually, they used to strip all of the B vitamins and iron out of our grain supply. And the FDA mandated that they return those vitamins or enrich our cereal and bread supply with those B vitamins, including the folate and iron back in 1998. And because of that, they did see a reduction in neural tube defects in pregnant women, the fetuses, and the babies. I think the reduction was about 35%, so it was very significant. So that is one of those reasons that we bump up that amount for pregnant women. So folate deficiency by itself is very rare. There are a lot of foods that you can get folate from, but it's usually associated with other deficiencies, such as a poor diet, alcoholism, or not being able to absorb your food well, or your nutrients well, and that could be due to like an autoimmune disease or other disease. So folate sources, again, we see that beef liver up there at the top, boiled spinach, our breakfast cereals that are fortified again, and our grains, our breads are fortified. So you get some from those. Asparagus could be a good source as well. And again, you'll have the link to find some of these lists if you're interested in knowing what those good sources are. And my folate recipe is balsamic and soy asparagus. If you haven't tried asparagus, broiled or baked in the oven, I'd encourage you to try it again. It's just so nutritious for you. It's got a lot of the sulfur compounds, and again, it's going to be help with boosting your immunity. Some people don't like to use soy sauce, and it can be have a lot of sodium in it. So there are some alternatives out there I like to tell people about. There's liquid aminos, which is also, it also uses a soy product, but it's lower in sodium. So if you're not opposed to using soy products, that could be a different an alternative to get less sodium. And there's also coconut aminos, and that would be an alternative to soy. So there's no soy in that product. That will give you that same type of flavor without using a soy sauce. The company that makes, I think, the liquid and the coconut aminos is Bragg, B-R-A-G-G. Find that in the health market, generally, if you're looking for that. Again, the recipes will be on your cheat sheet that I send. So moving on, vitamin C. This is probably the most popular nutrient that we associate with immunity. The first thing we want to reach for if we're starting to have a cold. It does provide a barrier function to microbes passing through the skin, and it aids in microbial killing and removing, and helps reduce oxidative stress. So the recommended daily value for vitamin C is 90 milligrams per day. It's a little less for women, but in general, we just kind of say 90 milligrams per day because it's not going to hurt women to get that much. They do recommend, if you're a smoker, that you actually increase your vitamin C intake by about 35 milligrams per day, and that is to help combat that oxidative stress. So one of the strategies I use is from October through March, so about the 6 months of the year when it's colder here, when the flu season comes, I do boost my vitamin C by 500 milligrams per day. This high dose can help prevent colds, gout, and it might slightly lower your blood pressure. If you do continually take 500 milligrams, year round, that can increase your risk of cataracts. So you may not want to take quite 500 milligrams. I mentioned 500 milligrams because it's easy to find that dose, either 1,000 or 500 milligrams. You can also find probably 300 milligram doses or smaller doses, especially if you looked at the children's vitamins. But you want to just, if you're getting plenty of vitamin C in your diet, you're eating a lot of citrus fruit, maybe red peppers, that type of thing, you probably wouldn't need to take that 500 milligrams, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So 1,000 milligrams or more per day may increase that risk for kidney stones. So we really don't want to bump it up that high. And there's kind of this myth that if you take vitamin C at the first onset of symptoms, that will help you shorten that length of illness, but there's actually no conclusive evidence that will occur. You've probably heard of products like Emergency, that type of thing. There is a benefit with taking zinc, and I'll talk about that when we get to zinc in helping to shorten the run of that cold or flu. So vitamin C sources, we think of citrus fruits, of course, right away, but if you look at the top of the list here, that red pepper is actually one of the highest sources of vitamin C. So, and that's a half a red pepper. So if that's something you can incorporate in your diet, that will help you get that 90 milligrams very easily. Or obviously an orange or other citrus fruits. If you are on a statin, you do need to kind of be alert about the grapefruit juice or grapefruits, making sure you're not taking too much of that or over what your doctor might recommend. I think you can take some in general, but not as much. So again, great sources there of vitamin C. It's rare that we get a deficiency in vitamin C, although since fruit and juice has gotten kind of a bad rap because of the carbs in it, we have began to see more deficiencies because people aren't drinking, orange juice. It used to be kind of more of a daily thing. So it is important to get either the juice or the whole fruit. If you can get that, is probably a better option. Getting some of that in if you're not necessarily taking a supplement or eating these other vegetables that contain vitamin C. So my vitamin C recipe, I haven't tried this one yet. I bought the red peppers today, the jarred red peppers to make it, but it's a red pepper bruschetta. So that will be in your list that you get tomorrow. Vitamin D, so how it helps reduce inflammation, modulates cell growth, and supports our immune function. The recommended dosage for 1 to 70 years of age is 15 micrograms. And if you're over 70, they recommend 20 micrograms per day. You can get vitamin D through sunlight, getting exposure. A lot of times in the northern states where we're at, we just don't get most of the year enough sun. They actually recommend about 20 to 30 minutes at midday. And so that would probably, affect, a lot of us would be able to get that vitamin D boost in the, summertime or sunnier months and not necessarily in the winter months. So it is a common deficiency also because we don't eat a lot of the foods that are on the vitamin D list. If you're looking at supplements, a lot of times those are listed in IUs instead of micrograms, so international units. So I just wanted to give you that little conversion there. 25 micrograms is equal to 1,000 IUs. So this is something I also supplement October. So October 1st is my magic day, and I supplement that through the end of March. That vitamin D, I take that extra 1,000 IUs per day. And again, a lot of us are deficient or low in vitamin D. So this is something you can check if you go to your doctor and ask for a simple test to check that. There's also online kits you can get if you want to know what your vitamin D level is. For that serum level or that blood level, that little information down here, they measure that in nanomoles per liter. So under 30 would be consistent with a deficiency in vitamin D. So generally we want to see you probably between 30, and I'm just going to kind of estimate an upper range of maybe about 80. That's what I've read in the past. And those would be healthy ranges for that vitamin D. You can have adverse effects if you get your vitamin D level too high. So if you were to have that blood test, you came in at say 30 nanomoles per liter, and you wanted to adjust your status and bring up your level, say to 50 nanomoles per liter, that would be a jump of 20 nanomoles per liter. You would take that 20 times 100, and that would tell you that you should take 2,000 IUs per day. So again, depending on how much you want to bring that level up, that would dictate how much you would want to take per day of a supplement. So the vitamin D sources here, again, I said it's not always easy to get these in, cod liver oil being up there at the top. I don't think a lot of us are taking that or wanting to take that. Salmon, that's a great source. So that will get you close to that amount. But most of us aren't eating salmon probably every day. Great source to get that vitamin D in, maybe a couple times a week, you're getting some salmon in. Milk, if you're drinking milk, even the fortified versions of the nut milks or oat milks, those could be helpful in getting that vitamin D in as well. And then you could look at some of those fortified cereals. Some of those contain vitamin D as well. Or again, looking at your multivitamin, if you're taking that and seeing how much you're getting from that, and consider supplementing or bumping it up during our cloudier months, winter months here in the north. Also, if you have dark skin, you don't absorb vitamin D as well. And I think that some people aren't aware of that. So just being aware of that. So something that you might want to have checked out, occasionally through a blood test, just to know where your status is. My vitamin D recipe is balsamic glazed salmon fillets. I actually made this for dinner tonight. This is my favorite way to prepare salmon. And I cheat a lot of times with this. I just maybe throw in the honey, the mustard, and the balsamic and some oregano, and then glaze that over top. So don't worry if you don't have all the ingredients. You can modify this a little bit. But totally delicious. I threw it over a cabbage salad, and we love it that way, or over greens, or just plain with something on the side. So moving on, vitamin E. It's a powerful antioxidant, helps fight off infection. It helps with the immune function and gene expression. The RDA is 15 milligrams per day. There is a UL upper level for vitamin E, and that's 1,000 milligrams per day. It can affect our blood coagulation. So you could possibly hemorrhage if it thins the blood and you get too much vitamin E in your system. So again, you want to be careful what you're getting with your supplements, what you're getting in your diet, and if you're supplementing with vitamin E. So a lot of our nuts are great sources of vitamin E. In general, we're probably not going to get too much of it. If you're eating, say a couple ounces of almonds a day, that would get you pretty close. But if you're getting some other seeds or nuts in, those could be helpful. It's also present in some of our oils and some vegetables, fruits there, as you can see. But your nuts would probably be your higher sources, and your wheat germ. My vitamin E recipe is a dressing, and a simple dressing you can make with just water. You soak the sunflower seeds overnight, add some lemon juice, some garlic, a little sea salt, onion powder, and black pepper, and you go ahead and give that a whirl, and that will goes over a salad very nicely. I like to layer my flavors a lot of times when I'm cooking, so then I might add sunflower seeds to the salad as well, so something like that. But very delicious dressing that can help boost that vitamin E intake. So moving on from vitamins, we'll move to our only amino acid, which is glutamine. And we know amino acids are building blocks of protein. This one helps support the immune system and our intestinal health. And one of the foods that's very rich in glutamine is a bone broth or broth, because it has a lot of, that meat and the easily absorbed into our system. So if you think about, if you've been in the hospital and you've had a surgery or operation, one of the first foods they will give you or feed you is that broth, because they're trying to, make sure your gut's working for one, but also giving you glutamine to help with that gut repair and immune support. It's also a critical fuel source of our white blood cells, which are important for our immune system. Low glutamine may result if you have a major injury or burn or surgery, and it can mostly be obtained in the diet from regular foods. They say that 5 to 14 grams per day of supplement of glutamine appears to be safe over short periods of time. We also know, if you're working in the hospital and you happen to be working with people that have severe injuries, burns, or have had a surgery, that glutamine, along with protein, bumping it way up, is very helpful for repair. If you've ever seen or known someone in the nursing care center with bed sores, bumping up the glutamine and the protein is also very helpful in helping to heal those sores as well. So very important. I also have a client with a head wound that had a head wound, and that's one of the things that they'll also really bump up the protein for, to help repair and heal, because your body needs a lot of protein when you have those serious injuries. So glutamine sources, these would be mostly, the most readily available would be your meat animal sources. So your beef, chicken, fish, those dairy products, but you can also obtain glutamine from certain vegetables. So beans and beets, cabbage, spinach, carrots, Brussels sprouts, celery, and kale are great sources. And then fermented foods like miso, which is a soybean paste. And based on the amount of protein that we take in, it's estimated that we're taking in about 3 to 6 grams of protein on a daily basis. So my glutamine-rich recipe is steak and eggs. And this is probably not something that you'd want to have, every day for breakfast. It'd probably be pretty high in cholesterol. But, an occasional Sunday brunch or something, this might be a delicious recipe to have, and can bump up the iron as well in your diet. But that recipe's there. So moving on, I'll start with our 3 nutrients that are minerals. So iron, it's necessary for immune cell proliferation, maturation of those white blood cells. The RDA is for men and postmenopausal women, 8 milligrams per day. For women with menses, 18 milligrams a day, because they're still losing blood monthly. And then for pregnancy, again, you have that little scavenger, eating and taking those nutrients, you want that 27 milligrams per day. So those at risk for iron deficiency, and I like to just remind people in case they might fall into one of these areas, certainly are pregnant women, our infants and children, because they're growing so quickly, they need a lot of oxygen in the blood. Women that have heavy menstrual bleeding, frequent blood donors. So if you happen to be a blood donor and your iron starts to fall, or your hemoglobin, below 12.5 for women, I think, and 13 for men, they won't allow you to give blood. So you may have to give less frequently. Most people can give about 3 times a year. Some people definitely can give more, but you just want to make sure that you're watching that iron level and making sure you're getting some iron-rich foods in if you are donating blood. Other people at risk are going to be those with cancer, heart failure, GI disorders where there might be some bleeding, and then anemias of chronic disease as well. I do have the cast iron skillet on there. You can pick up some iron from using a cast iron skillet. So if you happen to be one of those people that are on that cusp of getting too low with the iron, this could be a great resource for you to use, cooking in a cast iron skillet to pick up some extra iron in the diet. So iron sources, again, some foods, breakfast cereals in particular, might be fortified with iron. Oysters, white beans, so like cannellini beans, could be a good source. Dark chocolate could be a great source. Again, the darker the chocolate, probably the better. And also you do want to watch that chocolate intake. You can get in too much saturated fat from eating a lot of chocolate. You see beef liver up there again on that list. And then a lot of our vegetarian sources would be like the lentils and the chickpeas, those type of things as well. I did put a picture there. It's actually chocolate covered cashews, I think is what that is. My iron rich recipe is the white bean chili, and chicken does have a little bit of iron in it, but those white beans would have iron as well. So that can be a great and delicious way to increase iron in the diet. Our next nutrient is selenium. It helps to lower oxidative stress in the body. That helps reduce inflammation as well. Studies have demonstrated that increased blood levels of selenium are associated with enhanced immune response. So the RDA for adult men and women is 55 micrograms per day, or I like to tell my clients 1 Brazil nut. And I gave this presentation to the fitness staff a couple weeks ago, and they said, "What's a Brazil nut?" And then finally one of them came up with the answer. It's that nut that we leave in the bottom of the mixed nut can that nobody eats. And it's kind of correct. It's that big nut in the mixed nut can. So hopefully now that you know that, you guys will all be going for one of those nuts here. And just eating one of those per day can give you that RDA of selenium. So when you're looking at the sources here, those Brazil nuts are up at the top. If you ate 6 to 8 nuts, you'd get about 544 micrograms, so much more than what you need. So again, you just need that 1 nut per day. Yellowfin tuna is a great source. So some of those fish, shrimp, beef livers again on this list. Eggs can be a source as well. So you can find a rich source here. You know, I tried to highlight the richer sources up in the top area there, or eat several of the sources that have a little bit less, you know, so combining those during the day to help reach that amount of selenium. My selenium recipe is a seared ahi tuna steak. You can buy these tuna steaks. I often get them just at Hy-Vee, and in the meat at the meat counter. And this is another great recipe. One thing about tuna is we think here in Iowa that we have to cook everything to death because of our red meat that we cook all the time. But ahi tuna just really needs to be seared, and it can be pink in the center. And it took me a while when I started cooking ahi tuna to get used to that idea, to leave it a little pink in the center. But again, just a great recipe to help increase that selenium in your diet. So our last mineral is zinc, and it helps to fortify the immune system. It may also help with wound healing and age-related macular degeneration. Again, zinc is one that they say if you start to take it at the onset of that cold, the first sign of those symptoms, it can help lessen the duration of that cold. They do not recommend the intranasal zinc because it may permanently diminish your sense of smell. So you want to be careful if you're trying to use any of that. The RDA for males is 11 milligrams, for females, 8 milligrams per day. Too much zinc, there is an upper level limit, and that's 40 milligrams per day, which could cause indigestion, diarrhea, headache, nausea, and vomiting, which might make you feel worse than actually having a cold. And long-term side effects. So zinc competes with copper in the body. So if you think about our cells having these receptor sites where the nutrients latch onto to provide the functions that they do, if you take in too much zinc, it can outcompete copper. So what would happen is you excrete the copper and you could end up with a copper deficiency. So a sign of that would be possibly numbness and weakness in the arms and legs. And this is one other thing, hopefully you guys can see this. And I don't recommend brands, but this is certainly the one that I found at Natural Grocer that I use. And I'm not sure if I'm holding it in the right spot because all I can see is my screen. But it's a zinc and elderberry lozenge. And I take one of these every day during the cold and flu season too. So I start about October 1st and go through the end of March. It provides 5 milligrams of zinc. So the one thing I want to caution people on is if you were to take zinc lozenges while you're sick, for a sore throat, if you took 8 of them that have 5 milligrams in, you're going to be at that upper level limit. So you don't want to be sucking on zinc lozenges every day for several days in a row. You could begin to deplete that copper in your system. So if you are taking lozenges, maybe you take 1 zinc or 2 zinc, and then you take some other type of lozenge as well. So zinc sources, again, some of our meats are great sources of zinc. Again, we're looking for that 8 to 11 milligrams. Oysters are way up there, that 74 milligrams. Then you might have to, again, combine sources, look at any multivitamins you're taking. If you're taking a lozenge or something like that, make sure you include all that in so you don't go over that upper level of that 40 milligrams. So you can combine a bunch of those foods. My zinc recipe is a simple oyster stew with canned oysters. And I know this is a common superfood that they serve on Christmas Eve, I think, generally on the Eastern coast. But my mother made oyster stew a lot when I was growing up. And we used just the tinned oysters. If I'm making like a tuna casserole, something like that, a lot of times I will throw in a tin of oysters just to bump up the nutrients there. So again, something you might add to that list here over the winter of different foods to try. And then I just have one bonus slide here. that I added herbs for immunity. And I'm a big believer in herbs. I'm a big tea drinker. I just showed you the lozenges that I use, that Sambucol, that is the elderberry lozenge, and that one has the zinc in it. So that elderberry, it's deep purple berry, it's antifungal, antimicrobial. You can also buy dried elderberries. At least last year I bought them at Natural Grocers, and I made my own elderberry cough syrup with those. So there's recipes out there. The next one is echinacea. That's the purple coneflower. It helps stimulate the immune system to produce natural killer cells. Those are a type of white blood cell that will go in and take out any of the foreign objects or microorganisms that are in your system. Ginger, it's antimicrobial, antibiotic, anti-inflammatory, and it contains iron, vitamin C, zinc, and folate. So again, a lot of these nutrients we talked about this evening. Garlic stimulates the white blood cells. It contains vitamin C and selenium. Reishi mushroom. I have a tea that I drink that has the reishi mushroom. It's an adaptogen. So adaptogens help the body to fight off stresses. And that reishi mushroom contains selenium and vitamin D. And then astragalus root, it's also an adaptogen. It's anti-inflammatory, antiviral, and it contains, again, many of these nutrients we talked about tonight: vitamins A, C, E, iron, selenium, and zinc. And let's see, I pulled that list using thegreatest.com, health, and webmd.com. So I think that is my presentation. For all of you guys that have joined me, do you guys have any questions tonight? You just need to unmute yourself if you want to ask me a question. Anyone?
Sandy, I have a question.
Sure.
A lot of the sources of food, when they say spinach, you'll say cooked or boiled. What about raw? Is that absorbed as well, or is that less effective?
Well, spinach, from what you see on the information here and from what I've always been told, is cooking it helps you to absorb the nutrients better. So I think that's why you generally see that eating it cooked is going to be better absorbed at a higher rate. So you'll get more nutrient than if you eat it raw. I feel it's fine to eat it raw. You just probably won't get as much of the nutrient. I like to cook my spinach into omelets or egg whites in the morning. So I do, use a little bit of oil, and I throw in tons of vegetables, mushrooms and olives and tomatoes and spinach, and cook that together. And that's one great way, I think, to get, cooked spinach in without, I don't like cooked spinach plain, and I think a lot of people don't. If you didn't grow up with it, it may not be your favorite food to eat plain or with olive oil or garlic. And I know a lot of people will eat it that way, but if you can find other ways to get it in cooked, that's probably going to be your best.
Thank you.
Yeah, more nutritious, more absorbable. Any other questions? That was a great question.
Hey, Sandy, I noticed that on your ahi tuna, you had grilled that, and I don't have a grill pan. Is there another way to make that?
I think I've baked it in the oven before as well. So yeah, you could certainly try it that way. I've also tented it, like put a foil tent over top of it and cooked it in just a regular frying pan. So like a little bit of oil in the bottom, and then and I learned this from another dietitian, that she just put the ahi tuna in there and then put a tent of foil over top of it and then cooked it that way. So it kind of steamed the top of it as well. Because you don't want to cook it too long. Again, it's a little better still if it has that little bit of pink center. And it takes a little bit of time to get used to that. But
okay. Well, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you can definitely try some other ways.
Okay.
Great question. What else? Anything else? Well, just remember, you guys can always email me if you have any questions. And then everyone that signed up, I will go ahead and send out that little cheat sheet. It will have all those recipes on it, as well as some of those links if you're interested in learning more. I hope this was helpful, and I appreciate you joining me tonight. And I will let you guys all sign out.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thanks for joining.
I had a good